Thank ye. Man, I'm pretty nervous up here tonight. It's been an emotional journey for sure. Coming back to Northern Ireland, I thought during the pandemic that I'd never be back because of all the restrictions and everything going on, and here I am back in Northern Ireland again. What a trip! What a trip! But it's also been a nostalgic journey back to where I was. I was here for 6 years. And emotional too, in a way. You know, Phil, when I talked to him, 10 days ago, he told me that kind of the theme of the last couple weeks had been suffering and suffering well. And so I really started digging into the Bible and actually looking in the mirror, thinking about my life. And man, just the journey of life is just so crazy, isn't it? So many ups and downs. And when in reality, when I looked at my life, I have not suffered well. You know, it talks about to learn how to suffer and you gain perseverance. Yeah, maybe if I make it to 80, I'll just not care about anything anymore. But it's like that time in between when we get into the world. You know, as children, I was telling Phil an example, like I've seen like childlike faith where you see the videos of kids going through cancer treatment, chemotherapy, and the parents are bawling and losing it. And the children are just like, it's okay, mommy. If I die, I'll be with Jesus in heaven today. You know, and it's just like, holy frick, you know, and then you get through in the middle of life, and I freak out when my daughter has a fever and just I don't suffer well, and I'll share some of my story about. But then you get to the ending of your life and you see your grandparents just praying and like they've been through so much, they finally have that perseverance after living 70, 80 years. But it's an honor to be here. It really is. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. Let me just pray real quick. Dear Lord, I'm just so thankful that I accepted you, that I surrendered my life to you, that you changed my heart. Dear Lord, I was walking down the wrong path for so many years. Just tonight, dear Lord, I ask you to send the Holy Spirit. Give me the words to say, and I just pray that the hearts that receive this will receive it well, and hopefully it touches someone's heart that's sitting in here today, maybe a young lad or a young lady or whoever that just needs to surrender. Dear Lord, you are so, so good. I thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. I don't know if this is being taped, but I want to give a shout out to my wife, Katiela, and my son, William and Gigi. Actually, on the way over here, I was getting kind of emotional in the plane. You know, I had 2 long flights, and this is my first time being away from my kids for more than 4 hours. And so just the thought of that and just thinking about my life on the way over and my testimony and what God had to bring me through to get a hold of me, you know, because I was just a stubborn bugger like some of you guys are out there. It takes a while to, you know, finally get it and finally get to a place where you want to just give up and, okay, God, do what you want with me. So anyway, let me start. My name's Neil Clarke. I was born here in Northern Ireland. My father had this great idea that he was born and raised here in Portadown, and he had this great idea every time my mom was pregnant to send her back to have us born here in Northern Ireland. That's how mad my dad was about his wee country. So we were all born in Northern Ireland, but we grew up in Southern California. My dad was the type, to give you, I guess, a better picture of what my dad was like. He grew up on the Lockall Road. The Redmondville estate, my good job there. Sorry, you caught me off guard. You don't usually hear you for Redmondville. But my grandfather's stepfather was John Redmond, and that's why they named that estate. That's where they lived. They had a farm on that road, and people were afraid to drive by on the weekends because my dad and his 3 brothers had rifles and shotguns, and they'd shoot at cars going by. So my dad was a bit of a nutter, and so he sent my mom over here to have us born, and we went back there, and we We were raised in Southern California. We were the only kids that would go to school on St. Patty's Day in all orange. And there was just no option. And everyone else is showing, oh, I've got green underwear, look at me. And here's me in just all, orange shirt, orange socks, everything. My life was pretty normal, the youth growing up, and then at about 15 years old, I noticed that there were problems in my mom and dad's marriage. Fighting, bickering all the time, not talking to each other, and that kind of just became the norm. But then when I graduated high school, and I graduated with honors, but my grades started to dip there at the end just because I kind of lost the desire to do well. When you see your parents fighting all the time and it feels like divorce is imminent, I just kind of gave up and coasted at the end, but I still graduated with honors. And 6 months after I graduated, I saw my mom pack up all her stuff in a U-Haul truck and leave. Now, she didn't just leave to another town. She left to 3 or 4 states away. It was a 4 or 5 hour flight to get to her. So I can remember on that day sitting on the curb outside the house just crying. That was a tough time to be a young man who had not even really entered into adulthood, to see your mom drive away. It killed me. It left a huge hole in my heart, and for the next 10 years, I searched for something to fill that void through women, drugs, alcohol. I was angry because of it, and I did not suffer well. I started using drugs at probably the age of 19, got arrested the first time for under the influence of crystal meth, went to jail. While I was in jail, the cops laughed at me. They asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I kind of want to be a basketball coach and a teacher, and they just laughed at me. It's impossible now. They're just, you stupid, and it just compounded matters. I left that jail and went right back to another drug house and started smoking meth again. At about 19 years old, I almost shot a man in the face. I was so angry. He sucker punched me in a gym that we were at, and I had a little 5-shot revolver in the car that my dad gave me when I was 13 years old, and I always kept it in there for an emergency. And I chased him out of the gym. Well, I guess I could just tell you the story. I was playing, and he kept fouling me, and I was like, dude, what up, And he pushed me, and everyone separated us. And while they were holding me back, he ran around and jumped over and punched me in the face. And whatever that did ignited some anger inside of me that I had never had. And I ran out to the car, grabbed the gun, came inside the gym, and I saw him run out. And I ran out to meet him in his car. And by the time I got him and grabbed his shirt and I pulled out the gun, he was crying. He pissed himself, and I was crying too. And thank God my friend, who was a gang member, came up and said, don't shoot him, give me the gun. And he took the gun away. So I was putting myself in situations like that I should have never been in. By the time I was 20, I was dealing drugs. My dad found out, and he kicked me out of the house. My dad was all about tough love, and even looking back on it, what was he to do? Let me continue to stay there. He knew the types of people that I was hanging out with, and they weren't good people. All of my friends were drug dealers and gang members and guys that were in and out of prison and in and out of youth authority when it's kind of like juvenile hall and stuff like that when you're younger. And I was just running with the wrong circle. So Dad kicked me out, pushed me more into the streets, and I started to live with a family in Corona, California, right next to the police station, that were dealing drugs. And I started helping them deal drugs. And it was a pretty good front because here's a white guy. You'd never, back in the day, it was just, I was kind of clean cut, and I was young. They would have never expected me. So I was doing that with them. And within 3 months, they invited me on a trip. And I was down for whatever, dummy, not thinking. And I ended up smuggling drugs, motorhomes. You know what a motorhome is? Big motorhomes full of heroin, weed, and cocaine, filled throughout the walls. And here's me driving all the way across America from California to Chicago. And I did that trip a couple times. And I never even realized the gravity or the severity of what I was actually doing. You know, when you're young, you don't think of consequences, and especially when you have no hope in your life. And it wasn't until my second or third trip, I'm driving through Nebraska, driving like 90 miles an hour down the interstate highway. And a public service announcement comes on about the Nebraska state sheriff or something like that. They had seized 2 tons of marijuana and this many tons of this. And if you're caught with, flip's sake, it was like more than an ounce, or no, more than a pound of any of those drugs, you get a minimum of 25 years in prison. And that, just in that moment, I was like, holy crap. So all I did was just slow down. I didn't pull over and ditch the motorhome, but I finished the trip and got back, and there were some things that went on, and I just said, okay, I'm gonna kind of start going back to church at the time and going back to school, but I definitely did not surrender to God and surrender the things that I was suffering from. Over the next 9 years, drinking, partying, women, fighting all the time. I grew up in an area in Southern California where there were a lot of gang members from the Mexican side and the African American side, and if you didn't know how to fight or couldn't stand up, you were gonna, I guess, get pushed around or whatever. And my dad always raised me that you stand up for yourself and you learn how to fight. So I had gone to jail from 19 to 29, probably 5 different times for DUIs, car crashes when I was drunk, drugs, fighting, all of it. And I finally had to do prison time. Now there's a difference. There's county jail time, which can be a lot tougher usually because that's where the proving grounds are for the gangs. So there's a lot of fighting and stuff like that. And usually when you get locked up in California, you're divided into race. You can't choose. If you get locked up in California, it's a race war when you go in. You can't be like, no, I don't want to get involved in that, because you'll get in trouble. You'll be alone. So you have to go in with your white race. If you're black, you go in with the blacks. You can't intermingle. You can't hang out with them. You can't do anything like that. Or you get in trouble from your own kind, and then you get kicked out if you want to say that. And then you're vulnerable to everyone, including your own. So I go to prison for the first time. This is, let's see, I can't remember what year. I think it was 2001. And, you know, the way my dad always raised me is that he always wanted to hear my stories when I get in a fight with someone, you know? He always loved it. He was a good Christian man, but he always loved it, you know? I'd always say, Dad, I got in a fight yesterday. And he'd put the paper down. He always had to put it down times. My aunt would send him, put it down time. Every time they'd read through them, she'd send it. So he'd have a flipping box full, and he'd just keep going through them. And so, Dad, I got in a fight. He'd put the paper down, sit down and tell me. And so I'd tell, you know, his first 2 questions would always be, was he bigger than you? Because he never wanted me to fight someone smaller. The second question was, did you teach him a lesson? And then he'd want to hear it. So when I went to prison, I was like, okay, I'm tired of doing time, but just because of all the stuff that I'd done up to that point, they just said, you know, the cumulative effect is you got to go and do prison time. So I'm actually kind of thankful, because county jail, the guys that are in there, when you're fighting all the time, you're fighting as a group, and usually the white guys aren't in there for like gang stuff and fighting all the time. They're there for like a DUI, or, you know, they forgot to pay their taxes or something like that. And so I'm like in with a crew, like a bunch of old men or young kids, you know, whereas the the blacks and the Mexicans in California grew up on the streets, and they know how to fight, and so it's not a very fair fight. So I knew going into prison that in prison, to save people from getting killed, they keep it even numbers where you go. So I go in there thinking, okay, I can do this. I'm going to have some stories to tell. I'm going to make the most of it and get out, you know. And so I go in to Wasco State Prison in Bakersfield. My first night, you go in, they introduce you to the shot caller. You know, there's the Mexicanos or the Sureños, they're the Southern California gang members. They've got a shot caller who is the guy that kind of speaks for them and works things out or gives orders. So they sent me to a guy that was in charge of the white guys, or they call us Woods in Southern California or California prison system. You're either a skinhead or a Wood. A Wood is non-affiliated. You're just, you know, you can just go in there. You know how to scrap. You're a badass or something, and they look at you. All right, you're with us. You know, and so the first thing they do, they'd show you. You know, these are the white showers. Do not use this shower. This is for blacks. This is for Mexicans. This toilet is ours. This toilet is theirs. Do not use that. Do not sit here. Do not. I mean, it was serious. If you sit there, if you use that shower, if you piss over there, you're going to start a riot. You're going to have some trouble coming your way. So it was weird. They kind of introduced me that night. I get up in the morning. I see all the white guys working out in the corner, and I loved that, so I went over and joined them. The very first day, I lay down in my bed for a nap, and an old man comes up and kicks my bunk. I take the towel off my face. I was like, what is it? And he said, young lad, young man, not young lad. Young man, I'd get up if I were you. There's friction in the house. I get up, start putting on my boots. He's like, no, what are you doing? I was like, I'm not going to sit on my bunk, because you always heard, at least from my friends, and the truth is that if your race is involved in a fight and you don't get up, they'll identify you. They'll give you basically a bad rap. They'll tell everyone else that you did nothing, and then you're going to be a target for a stabbing or whatever. So I got up, got laced up, and got ready to go. Long story short, a mini riot broke off in our day room, and it was 85 guys fighting at the same time. The correctional officers came in, pepper spray all over the place, and I was one of the last two that got down on the ground. I mean, you don't get down on the ground when there's a fight going down, right? So I'm waiting until guys are almost done, and then they're yelling at me, get down. They handcuff everyone, take pictures of everything. They haul you off, and you go to a higher level, you know, that's more dangerous or for more serious criminals. The punishment for me, they said that I was a main player in that fight. I wasn't really. I was just reacting. But I loved to fight, so I was in there too, you know. But I also, if people are going to fight, you better fight. You're not going to, you know, what are you going to do, duck and dive the whole time? You can't do that, right, Finbar? No, you got to swing. You got to swing your fists. So they gave me 60 days in a cell by myself as punishment. It's called CTQ'd. And they put me in this cell, and it was boring, right? I'm like walking around. You're in a cell that might be like the size of your bathroom. You know, a bunk attached to the wall, a urinal in the corner, and it might be from here to here. And maybe, maybe like from here to the edge of the stage. And you just pace all day or do push-ups or whatever. So a couple days in, I hear, library, library. I see this guy pushing a cart. I look out the little window in the cell, and I see this guy pushing a cart with books. I'm like, I'm on it. Finally, I got something, you know? He comes over, and he said, what do you want? And I start pointing out books. I'll take that one and that one. And then he looked at his list. And he's like, nope, you're CTQ'd. You don't get any book but this one. And he slides a book under the door, and I look, and it's the Bible. What a trip, huh? And all that, you know, here it is. I'm like, flip's sake. Well, I picked it up, put it on my bed. Probably for the next couple hours, I did nothing. I just still paced around and looked out and you're watching all the drama out in the, cell block. And man, and then I started reading that Bible. It was like God took me to a place where I had nothing else, and it was all Him. No distractions at all, just Him. And I'll tell you what, so for 60 days, I had this routine. I got up in the morning, I prayed for an hour, I did my workout. They passed the breakfast under the door, you eat your breakfast, then I'd read the Bible for 3 hours, then I'd have lunch, and I read the Bible probably 6 to 8 hours a day. Prayed 2 or 3 hours a day, and I had never felt peace like that in my life. And I'm here in the middle of a war zone outside watching stuff go down and seeing the drama. And I just had this unbelievable sense of peace. To tell you the truth, I don't know if I've ever felt that peace again, I feel peace like that when I pray. I was in a prayer group last year and this year too, where we prayed every morning for 2.5 hours from 5 a.m. till 7:30. And that was freaking cool, praying for other people. But taking everything away from you, your job, your family, your friends, your phone, your life, and only Jesus there, only that Bible. Freaking amazing. And here's me telling God, if you get me out of here, I'll change, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. What do I do when I get out? I go right back to the alcohol and partying and easy women. I was a whore myself, but I'm not saying it's the women's fault because us men can be bad too. But I go right back to it, I jumped the gun there a little bit. I go to get out and sign my parole papers, and I met with immigration. They had just changed the federal immigration laws, and if you were born outside the United States and didn't have citizenship in America, you were up for deportation. So I go to parole, and there's immigration. Flip's sake. Here we go again. They flew me from California to Arizona, and I sat in a federal prison there for 4 months fighting my case. I was losing. Federal law is just black and white. If you've done this, you were born in Belfast, you'd done more than a year in prison, you'd done this, you're out of here. They finally bonded me out. I was there for 4 months, and they bonded me out. And that's when I came back, and you're like a caged animal. You dog, you open the gate, and pew, I was gone. Back to the party and back to everything else going on. I fight my case. I'm doing well in life, finally turn everything around. I'm running a mortgage business, selling homes in Southern California. And in September of 2000, and I received a letter saying that I had 30 days to turn myself in for deportation. And like the man that I am, I ran. I didn't want to go, I said, I've got all this stuff going on. I finally got a career. I'm making good money. I'm doing things, And I went on the run, and they caught me. They caught me at my dad's house in September of 2007. They arrested me, took me to another federal prison, and I arrived here in Northern Ireland right before Christmas in 2007. I think it was like the 20th of December. I come here to Portadown. What do? Well, they introduced me I start playing for Hanover Football Club, start drinking it up, start partying it up, just like I never stopped before, I was good at it. And, man, I was here for 15 months. And my dad talks to me one day, and he says, Neil, why don't you just come home? Dad, I can't. I'm deported for life. I cannot go back. He said, sure you can. Fly into Mexico and sneak across the border like all the Mexicans are doing. I was like, Dad, I look a little different than a Mexican. They can walk across the desert for 4 days. I'll die of starvation or thirst in 3 or 4 hours in the desert, He says, just do it and I'll come and pick you up. So right there on the spot, I say, okay, give me your credit card details. I book my flights from here to Paris to Mexico City. The next day I fly up to Tijuana. I'm there. I try to sneak across the border. I get caught, put back in the federal prison, deported again 4 months later. And at this point, I had even less because all the stuff that I had, I either sold or gave away. I'm like, I'm either getting locked up or I'll make it, one of the two, you know? I come back, I have to stay at my cousin Gator's house, and it just wasn't good. I had no money, and this time I was even worse off. They get me a little flat in Redmondville under Mad Ann, or over Mad Ann. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but what a sweet spot that was. I was losing my mind, man. And I got to the point, man, I had told myself that I'm not going to break the law. I told myself I'm not going to break the law. But there was so much abuse coming from that house. There were guys that were spreading rumors that I was a pedophile, that I was working for the police. Oh, he's working for the peelers, all this stuff, and I was about to lose it. And I seriously scrapped that plan. I said, I got to teach these guys a lesson. So I call up my cousin, Ron Murdoch, and I said, Ron, I need something from you. And he said, what is it? He said, I need you to bring me like a bat or like a 3-foot piece of wood, because I didn't want to just hurt these guys. I wanted to maim them. I really did. Like, I used to have a real angry side, I used to kind of get joy out of hurting people, seeing them hurt. And I guess that's because, when you're hurt, you like to pass that on. But I also had that from my dad, that I just wanted to teach these guys a lesson, And he comes over, I just asked for a bar or something. He said, what's it for? And I said, I'm going to prop it up behind the door just in case anyone tries to kick in the door or something like that. He comes over 30 minutes later, it's raining hard outside. And I go outside, sit in his little car. And he said, Neil, I couldn't bring you that, but I did bring you something. He said, I want to pray for you right now. I was so flippin' upset. I closed my eyes and you don't know. So I go back into the house, I thank him, I start crying. I'm so angry and I'm just tired of it, and I laid down on my bed on my face and I just cried out to God and basically said, okay, if you've got a plan for me, let's see it. Give it to me. I'm tired of it. I'm just tired, and in reality, what Ron did that night, it's really important for us as Christians to do for each other. When people are hurting and in pain and suffering, you just don't go over to them and say, hey, read this verse, it'll make it better. Hey, do this, how about just go over and pray and love on them like he did, And that's what he did for me, and that's exactly what I needed in that moment. And from the moment that I surrendered that night, and believe me, and I was fighting with God. I said, whatever your plans are, they better not be here in Northern Ireland. I am not staying here for the rest of my freaking life. So from that moment on, I applied for a job. Flip's sake, I think it was like 6,000 people applying for the Kingspan job. I was one of 20 that got it, like 2 weeks after. They moved me out of there because I went into the housing executive and I said, you've got blood on your hands. So, if you don't move me out of this place, I'm going to freaking wreck someone's freaking, Anyway, so I went in, I kept going back. I was going through a process. I had lived up there for 9 months or something. And I kept going back and said, listen, something bad's going to happen, and it's not going to be my fault. So in order to get to the point, God, I was a stubborn man. I still am pretty stubborn, but he doesn't expect you to change everything. But what will happen when you surrender to him is he'll change your heart. That's what he'll do. And from that moment, God opened up a door for me to go to Costa Rica. I am living there. I've been there for 8 years now. We are starting up a religious association. It's kind of like a nonprofit. I've got a wife. I found someone that could tolerate me. what a blessing she has been. I've got kids, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they're my life. That's all I've ever wanted. You know, you talk about me with kids, man. It's just, it's incredible, you know, what God has done in my life. And now I'm able to teach my son about Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and have these talks with them. You know, you're raising up a soldier for Christ. You're not raising up your best friend, you know. I have this opportunity to raise up a man of God with integrity, with character, to stand up for himself, stand up for God. And I tell him all the time, like, if we have to die for Jesus, we will die for Jesus and we will be in heaven. And he knows that. And I'm schooling that little dude, man. And you got to do the same thing in this world right now. Is so freaking weird. And like, if you can't see the spiritual war going on right now, you know, you got to be prepared for it. But that's my story. You know, God is so good. It was through my surrender that he changed everything. And I don't want to get emotional here, but he was so patient, and he's so patient with us. You can keep going and drinking, and you can keep doing what you're doing, and he's going to wait there for you. It's a matter of you accepting that challenge and walking through that door to meet him. He'll open the door. A lot of people just peek in. Oh, I don't like that too much in there. Do it. It's changed my life. So anyway, that's my story. That's my story. God is so good, you know, and if there's any guys out there that are struggling with anything, come see me after. Or, I don't know what else to say, but God is so good. Yeah.
No. Stay. No, there's so much that Neil hasn't told you as well. Just a first thought that this is what I tell people when you're not here about you, which kind of really encouraged me, was that somehow, and this is what I love about God, he uses our sin and he switches it upside down. So Neil, obviously in prison and being in LA, you had to learn Spanish, right? Is that where you learned Spanish?
Yeah, in the county jails and on the work sites with all the Mexicans.
Yeah. And so what I love is that so Neil then gets deported here, surrenders his life as best he could, and then the next thing, somehow he decides he wants to go to Costa Rica, and then the church we were a part of then had a missionary. So Neil, I don't know whether it's prophetic from Neil, but he booked his flights to Costa Rica for whatever reason. And then 2 weeks later after doing that, we had a random missionary come into the church we were a part of from Costa Rica. And Neil's like, I booked my flights to go to your country. This guy was American from Jacksonville, but ministered in Costa Rica. And somehow, some way, in God's grace, in his sovereignty, and all those things mixed together, Neil ends up working for that guy. And even better than that, I start to see pictures of what Neil's doing. He's working with kids, running around the streets, using the Spanish that he learned in jail because they speak Spanish. Even better than that, then Neil tells us the first, I don't know if you remember this, one of the first letters you put out when you were over there, which just blew me away. So Neil's obviously learned to face death in the face on multiple occasions, whether it be in jail, on the streets. And one of the first things he done when he was in Costa Rica, if you were telling the truth then, was you had to come face to face with a gang member. Is that right? You were trying to, yeah.
Right. So it's just easier for me to tell you than him telling you. Yeah, I was down there for maybe like a week or two. And we go down to this park, and I'm there, and there's a bunch of kids playing basketball. I'm showing them how to shoot, you know, playing with them. And all of a sudden, I'm with another missionary also, and this guy comes up on his bike, and he's kind of circling around on the basketball court, and I look over at my friend, and he's just like, I'm like, what the frick is wrong with you? I'm like, and I look at the guy, and the guy comes up on his bike, staring at the other kid, the other guy. And I step in front of him. ¿Cómo está? How are you? You know, my Spanish was not good at that point. I couldn't really understand him, but I understood that he was talking about killing someone. So I said, amigo, no entiendo, no comprendo. I don't understand, and he's like, espera, yo voy por mi hermano. And he goes to leave, and I could smell the alcohol on him, and I could see the cocaine around his nostrils. So he was jacked up. And he leaves, and for whatever reason, my buddy was like, I'm out of here. I'm gone. And he runs. And I'm like, man, you do. Well, I told him at first. He's like, I got to go. I said, if you do that, that dude's going to control you. You got to stand your ground. You've got nothing to fear. He just runs off. I'm like, flip. Okay, so here I am with these kids, and they all look scared. They're like, es malo, telling me the guy's bad, really bad. It's like, está bien, relax. I walk over, and I'm starting to feel kind of stressed out myself, just because when you see other people panicking around you. So I go over, and I just say a quick prayer. Dear Lord, give me strength. I have nothing to be fearful for, Let me just sit here and see what happens. And he comes back, and he finds a translator, and the translator comes over. And I could tell the translator's trying to be nice. He's like, tell him, I could tell what the guy was saying. He was telling me that he's going to put 2 bullets in my head if I ever come back here again. And the translator's like, he's not very happy with you. Maybe you don't come back here. And I was like, dude, listen, I want you to tell him exactly what I say, and you need to freaking tell me exactly what he's saying. I hear him saying balazos, bullets. I said, tell him that Jesus has sent me down here to work with the children, and I don't care about any drama that's going on in his life. I'm not here particularly to upset him or anything like that, but tell him I'm going to be back in here every day with these children. So we go back and forth a couple times, and the guy, he's standing firm. He's like, nope, you tell him if I see him back down here again, I'm going to put 2 bullets in his head. And the other guy too. I was like, nope, you tell him I am not going to leave. I am not afraid of him, that Jesus has a plan for me and he has me here. Tell him that. So we go back and forth, dude. It's like 4 times. Finally, I was playing with the kids on the playground, and we had been in that barrio a couple times that week, and already the kids were all on top of me and climbing on me. At that moment, his daughter comes out of like a daycare and runs past her dad, who was all jacked up, runs over and starts hugging me on my leg, just gripping my leg like this. And he looked at her, and he looked at me, and he just said, okay, you tell the other guy, if he ever comes back, that I'm going to put 2 bullets in his head if he comes back. I'm like, we got a deal. And we shook hands. And I go back up to the house, and my friend's like shaking. What happened? Oh, you better not go back into that barrio, dude. Well, what happened? No, not much. Just, we sorted some things out, but he does not like you, so don't go back there. So he stayed out of there for like 6 months, but it worked out. Awesome. Yeah.
Class. How good is that? No. And so it's just incredible how God has used sin, even our sin. God can use our sin, and he used Neil's sin to prepare him in the weirdest way for some of the gangsters that he would face on the ministry journey. And I don't know if there's another person in Northern Ireland could have done what Neil done, and it's probably a lot to do with what Neil had to go through. So it's just beautiful to see how God can turn all of our stories around, no matter how far we went, how bad we think we are, we're not bad enough. And God actually wants to use the sin and switch it upside down. And what a testimony. I just absolutely adored that story. And so Neil obviously went and ministered with that missionary who came to that church that week. God obviously knew way before Neil did and we did and anyone else did. And it all worked itself together for God's glory. And now Neil is absolutely a more mature version of himself, a more godly man, a stronger man than he's ever been, a more lovable man. And he always was lovable. But I'm a little less scared of him. I'm still a wee bit scared.
I'm almost 50. I'll be 50 this year.
50 this year. But here, Neil's actually going to be back with us this next Sunday morning. And so we're going to dig into a wee bit more of that. Just incredible what God's done with your life, Neil. So we honor you. Thank you, man. You have me in tears. Thank you for being faithful to God. and allow him to use you and use the worst situations in your life to bless people with some of the best love that you have and God has given you. So come on.